Hi, this is Lynn McCool, and I'm sending you this screencast today, partly because of the disrupted week due to your fall break and the fact that we didn't have labs this week, and also because I've had several questions about this particular assignment and some of the requirements of this assignment. So the assignment 5, infographics with its accompanying transmittal letter, is due this Friday. However, I did want to point something out to you. There is an error on the syllabus. You'll notice that on the syllabus it lists pronoun reference and using evidence and reasoning to support a thesis or a claim as part of your McGraw work. However, if you look at Blackboard, inside the McGraw-Hill Connect and Learn Smart assignments, you'll notice that there is not a folder for this week. And that was intentional. I did not assign any McGraw Learn Smarter Connect assignments this week due to the fall break, and also because of the fact that you were taking your midterm this week and you had assignment 5 due as well. So to reiterate then, you do not have McGraw-Hill this week, but you do have assignment 5, which is due this Friday at 5 p.m. So let's turn our attention now to assignment 5, and let me point out a few things that perhaps are obvious to you, but then there may be a couple of items that I mentioned that are not so obvious. So remember that this assignment actually has 2 parts to it, actually 3 parts to it. The first part is that you're designing this infographic, and there was some confusion originally about the size of the infographic. Should it be larger or smaller than a normal piece of paper? My thought was that it should fit onto a normal piece of paper, and if you're using one of the free software programs to design your infographic, you can easily do that by downloading it as a JPEG or an image and then inserting that image into a Word document, which obviously is a typical 8.5 by 11 size piece of paper. Then also you are giving, or with that infographic, there is an accompanying transmittal letter. Now, transmittal letter, that's just another name for a cover letter. However, being a letter, it is a more formal form of communication, which means that you should use the letter genre format. And so it should have the date, the inside address, the salutation, everything. So everything that you learned about formal letter writing in the prior assignment, you should include, with one exception. You don't necessarily this time have to have a letterhead because you're not actually really representing any company, you're just representing yourself. Now, if you want to create or use some kind of letterhead, you can, but it's not required in this particular assignment. Now, if you remember your infographic, you were asked to use some data set, and I gave you some suggestions where you might find some interesting data about Drake. So to find some kind of data set about Drake and to display it then in that infographic format. Remember that infographics use a combination of both images and text to tell or narrate some kind of story about the data that they display. And one of the interesting and important things about infographics is that they can often help to display information that is otherwise complex or hard to understand. So one of the things that you have to think about with this assignment is its context and the multiple audiences that this particular infographic as well as the transmittal letter should appeal to. Notice that after I give you the information on where to find data, I say analyze your intended audience in order to tell the story about Drake using that infographic genre. Make design choices that generate a positive response from your audience and use visuals to enhance and expand your text. So as you read through the directions then, you can see here's another directive telling you to consider your audience, your context, and your purpose, and to, again, analyze your intended audience. And I ask, who are the primary, secondary, and gatekeeper audiences? What are their needs? What factors are most likely to persuade them? However, I didn't really tell you here in the context who the specific audience would be, and that really isn't mentioned until I talk about the transmittal letter. So look at step 10. It says, address your letter to the Director of the Office of Student Inclusion, Involvement, and Leadership. Briefly explain how your infographic might be used to assist the office with getting students involved on campus. Suggest ways that the Office of Student Inclusion, Involvement, and Leadership might use this infographic with the orientation of new students to campus. Close with the building of goodwill, contact information, and a forward look. Download a letter template from Word to draft your letter. Use formal letter format. Okay, so now let's go back to this question. Who are your intended audiences? Who would be the primary, the secondary, and your gatekeeper audiences based upon now what you know, not only about the infographic, but also about that transmittal letter? Obviously, I give you some other tips as far as drafting a readable document, and that goes for both the infographic and the letter. And I will be looking to see, and so will your instructors, be looking to see that with your infographic, you're using those principles that we've talked about with visual design, so proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast, and particularly with contrast to make sure that anything that's in the foreground, in other words, anything that's on the top layer, is easily readable, and that whatever's in the background or what's on the bottom layer is not too dark or doesn't in some way fight with what's on top of the foreground as far as color and design choice. Okay, now I want to mention the third thing about this assignment. I don't know if you picked up on this, but after you have turned in your infographic and transmittal letter, which explains your design choices, that's the purpose of the transmittal letter, you will, during lab next week, make a very brief presentation of your infographic to your lab class. So 1 minute, 30 seconds to 1 minute presentation of your infographic. And in that little presentation, you should mention your data set. So what data set did you work with? Talk about what story you were trying to tell with that data set, and also discuss or share with the lab class the design choices that you made. In other words, why did you choose certain colors, the font, that's the kinds of images that you use to represent different things on there. So in every way that you can think of using course material, lectures, and readings from your book, employ the language of the course in your little presentation. In other words, what I mean by that, using terms that we've talked about. So perhaps you talk about proximity or repetition or alignment or contrast as you're explaining some of your design choices. So use the language of the course to explain your design choices. And again, about 30 seconds to 1 minute of demonstrating or showing to the class your infographic and explaining why you designed it the way that you did. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. See you again next week. Thanks.